Alright, so we'll begin Siman Samach Tes, Hilchos Melicha. We spoke about the various steps that are required to bring out the blood that is asar in a piece of meat prior to cooking it. Eventually we'll talk about another step where one can avoid the whole process of melicha, and that's called sleep, roasting it. The fire is able to extract all the blood as long as it's in an open spit, like in a barbecue where the blood is able to flow, and the meat will not just be sitting in its blood as it does in a boiler. So that's why you cannot do tzli in a boiler. That is a different procedure, but a lot of people like to cook their meat, and in order to cook the meat, one requires to do melicha. We did speak about the other option of eating it raw, but for most people, cooking is something that they do quite often, and even though the meat is kosher, the shechita was done properly, there's still a lot of other details that need to be done to this piece of meat to make it kosher 100%. Removing the chelev. If you're eating the back part of the meat, there's a gidanasha, there's a sciatic nerve that needs to be removed. There's all kinds of veins that have blood vessels that the melicha will not get to. But we spoke about the physics of the melech, how the melech does do a great job in extracting this blood that is internal. We're not talking about blood that's on the surface that hopefully was washed off, rinsed off. We're not talking about the internal blood. That if it were to be cooked, as the Meforshim explained, that blood would be poirish, would move, and that kind of blood is asur. Even though we did say that blood that is cooked and blood that has been salted and removed, that blood already is no longer perhaps it is no longer on it an isur deraisa, it's more of an isur derabanan. Nonetheless, it's asur. It has to be removed. And the proper way of removal involves hadacha. Hadacha, as the Mechaber says, the word means to rinse. It doesn't mean to soak. The word means to rinse. So we said because the Mechaber chooses the word lehadiach, it means that he probably holds with the shittas that hold that the main idea behind hadacha prior to melicha is to remove any blood be'ein that may be sitting on the surface. There's always a concern, like the shita of the smak, that if there's blood there, that this salt, it will have the opposite effect. Instead of drawing out blood, which it may do too, but it will reabsorb the blood that's there, be'ein, back into the meat. And what if it did? Well, if it did, according to some shitas, there's no other way to get that blood out again. Even with tzli, it would be asur, according to some. And there are other shitas that said that the hadacha is really to soften the meat or to make the salt work better to extract the blood. It helps. When you wetten the meat, the salt sticks better to the meat. It is able to draw it better. In other words, it's not necessarily because of the dam ba'ein, but it's much more to make it work properly. You need to soften the meat or to make it, to make the salt stick to the meat. All of these shitas are important because they can make a difference.
Is it softening makes more sense than
right. So therefore, according to those who hold that the whole idea is a softening, then of course what's required is soaking. Right, that's correct. Even though according to one shita it could be understood, and that's the shita of the Ran, that that even the rinsing, a good rinsing of the meat is sufficient to soften at least the outer surface of the meat. It's not so much that we need to soften the entire piece from top to bottom, inside out. It's at least at the very, very top to make it so that the salt can penetrate. So there are quite a few shitas, and we didn't list them all, but more or less that's what they are. Anyway, we said that there are quite a few nafkaminas, and as we learn Hilchos Melicha, it's important to keep them in mind because these shitas make the difference in various halachas. And one of the important halachas that we covered last time was what happens if you salted by mistake without doing any hadacha. That's a very important thing to know because it could happen. Now the good thing that they do today is that they are mediach, the meat, in the bet hamitbachim, in the slaughterhouse. And we spoke about that's really one of the steps that they do. They hose it down. It's very bloody, so it's a good thing to do before you can get to work to it. Is that considered already hadacha? And that is actually mentioned. That was mentioned, let me see, where did we mention this?
Well, since you're going to start cutting again, at least there are some.
Oh, very good, right.
The cutting will
Right.
right.
Right. It's brought down in the tour. So we mentioned that if it was already done, you don't really have to do it. So the question is, what did he exactly do?
What does he mean? And then afterwards, they does he mean after they finished cutting?
Well, that's a good question. In other words, let's assume he did a good hadacha.
Right.
Then, what we understand from this is that, first of all, we see from the Mechaber and the Ramah that they don't put that much emphasis, at least lechatchila meikar din on shriya, and soaking it, that they're mainly concerned with hadacha, and that's what he brings down the tour here, that it would be sufficient, right, to hose it down. But lemaisa, we know that halacha lemaisa, we hold that in order to be yotze all the shitas, we do soak it. That's the minhag today, at least according to the Ramah.
In water, you mean?
To soak it in water for half an hour. So we do try to follow lechatchila all the shitas.
Svarim also mentions the Ramah.
Yeah, everybody basically does it. Yeah. Right? And there is another hadacha, which we'll talk about later, and that is the hadacha they do after it was salted. So after it's salted, you want to remove the salt. You want to rinse off the salt that has the meat. Yeah. Right.
Bloody.
Right. So anyway, so the Shach and the Taz discuss what does that mean, how much of an hadacha that has to be. So if it was really done hudach well, everybody agrees if it was really rinsed very, very well, that would be good. But the evidence. All right. Now, but Ilan pointed out that in the end it comes to your hands. You bought it. You may cut it. I mean, perhaps you shouldn't cut it because you want to salt it, right? And if you want to salt it, and before you salt it, you did cut the meat again with a knife, blood comes out, you're in trouble. So you have to rinse it out again.
Now, is here rinsing up, or do you have to again soak it for?
No, here rinsing would be enough. Yeah, because now we're concerned with the dam that came out. Why should you cut it? Well, they're big pieces. So there may be more than one reason of why you want to cut it. So you have to be concerned about cutting it, that's for sure. Because if it's not salted, there still could be blood that will come out.
But you might cut it too.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, right.
Right.
So very good. So it's good you brought that up, because even though it was rinsed well, still cutting it was one of the halachas that we learned that would require an additional at least hadacha. Okay, fine. Now, so what happens if it was salted, and now they're about to cook it, it's Erev Shabbos, oh no, what do we do? Oh, it's a mashgiach, it's a hotel, there's a lot. What now? According to some, this is a big problem. According to some shittas, salting without any hadacha, it's trouble. But Baruch Hashem, we have halachas of hefsed meruba. Shatat chak, the etat tzorech, before Shabbos, lechvod orchim, various kinds of situations where we rely on the more lenient opinions. And here it's not just a lenient opinion. There are quite a few Rishonim we're talking about here that say, hey, it's not about the dam ba'in. It's not so much about the dam ba'in there that we're concerned, especially if it's clean. It has to be softened. So if you didn't, okay, fine. So what happens if you salted? You haven't cooked it yet, of course. We're talking about it hasn't been cooked. What happens if it's salted without hadacha and it's already cooked? Oh, that's a big problem. And that we'll see later on.
Well, I think it's not with the Ramah.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem because right now we're one step before cooking, and that is okay. Well, now what?
Right.
Well, can I at least do it over again? So let's see the mechaber. So then we saw the mechaber. So that's important to know, and it's good to know that, okay, let's rinse it off real quickly and do it again. That's the halacha, the mechaber says. Mechaber tells us right away, listen, it's not so pashut, yesh oisrin, don't take it so lightly, but he at least paskins that you can do it all over again. Why? Because he relies on the opinions that nothing really happened with any dam ba'in that went back inside. And even if you hold that the dam ba'in goes inside, there is a rush that says that all this dam is niflat anyway. So it goes in, it goes back out. Why? Because of Kabbalah Kach Poltoi. We have a famous rule, Kabbalah Kach Poltoi, and we'll talk about that soon with the rush, that says, listen, the meat is salted, the meat is drawing out blood, it's going to draw out any blood that came in anyway. So you don't have to be choshesh for the smack in every respect. Not only does it absorb, it also stays there. It will never come out. No, it may come in, but it will come back out. So therefore, there are various reasons why the Mechaber chose to be lenient. You can see that all around there's quite a few opinions that hold that it's not going to be a problem to redo it over again. He doesn't say just go ahead and cook it. You do have to rinse it off and do it all over again, or soak it. And the Ramah is the one that told us that no, we say it's aser. Not only do we say it's aser, he holds that the minhag is to aser even if it's rak nimlach me'at, just a little bit. As we'll see, there's a minhag, not a real requirement, to be molech a piece of meat that you're going to roast, just a little bit. And so even though it was just a little salt, no, and it's already sitting there for a while, and we saw that there's various chilukim in this, but the Ramah says that lechatchila we're machmir, no good. Mihu b'makom hefsem meruba. We said that the Ramah and the Beis Yosef himself, of course, says that too, of course, that it's yesh lehatir. Then we said that im lohudach rak me'at. If you did at least rinse it, at least the very least a little bit, kodesh hamalchot it's muter b'di'eva even without hefsem meruba. Okay, so real quickly, just a quick review of what happens if, in a situation of you did not do a complete salting. Because right now we want to know what to do as far as this piece of meat. I mean, what are the options? We have the following situation. We have a piece of meat where there was no hadocha, there was just salt. We know that's a problem. Okay, the question is, can you do tzli to it? All right, I understand I can't do, according to some shitas, I can't do it over again. I can perhaps cook it. It's also legame, but does also mean also legame? Could I do tzli? Now we said that this individual would be in big trouble had he cooked it without doing anything. In other words, he did the melicha without the hadacha, and he went ahead and cooked it. He would be in big trouble. The question right now is, could you do tzli?
After cooking it?
No, after cooking it, I mean, it's aser. Right? That, if it was cooked, it's a big problem. The question is, what happens if it was completely, you had a melicha. Let me see if I can find it. It's later on in Ayin.
When you're talking,
yeah. Yeah, also b'achila. Yeah.
Only
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, let me see if I can find it here. Yeah. The more later on in Ayin Vav says, and I might as well quote it to you now. Miu, im lo hidicho velo molcho klal, o molcho belo hadocho tchila v'nitzla kach muter. Bilvad shelo sho kach b'melichoso belo hadocho shir melichosoi. So he says over there, he adds a detail that we don't see here, but we'll see it in the Shach and the Taz, that in a situation where he didn't do any adocha, any melicha, but he did tzli, that's fine. But if he did molcho belo hadocha tchila, which we learned already, but here he adds a detail, v'nitzla kach muter bilvad shelo sho kach b'melichoso belo hadocha shir melichosoi. As long as it was not salted for the 18 minutes. So he holds over here, clearly, like the sheet is that if this was melicha, real melicha, which we'll see soon means covered site is all over, and it was a shear of 18 minutes or more, asur, completely. No, and nobody questions it. And he's right. What the Mechaber says is you can do it over again, all right? But here he adds the detail, but that's only without the shear of melicha. Okay, eventually we'll get to it. How that plays out. But here we need to know that in the following scenarios. What happens? You have three situations. You have either it was salted completely, but it was not kishir melicha. 3 minutes. Oh, he just caught it. Oh, we didn't do hadacha yet. That's situation number one. Situation number two was, it was just a little bit of salt, but it was there the whole shear of melicha, the entire 18 minutes. Or third scenario, little salt, little time. That's pretty much what we spoke about, because all the mechaber says is that you can do it over again. Not more than that, just that, yesho isu. So obviously you have to redo it. The question is, when? And can you do tzli? So the Taz brings down the Yamshel Shlomo that they hold, when it says asur, it's asur afilu letzli, because we have the sheet of the smak, the blood coming in and not being able to come out. Just that the Hefsed Meruba, the Ramah himself said, though we can rely on the lenient opinions, for bishul and kosher came letzli. In other words, that you can redo it. So even the Ramah says that, but that's only behefsed Meruba. Now, what happens there for scenario number one? That if it was nimlach and it was it was completely nimlach, but it was only for a few minutes. The Shach brings down the Darkei Moshe, I think, Teres Chatos, the Ramah later on, that it would be mutar letzli. At that point, you could do tzli. So it's a little bit salty.
Complete salt.
I'm sorry, it's a complete salted, in the first scenario, complete salted, yes, but it's a very short period of time. That's a very important detail. Just it wasn't so long, that means it's not ruined, you can still do tzli. But if second scenario, if it was just a little salt, but it lasted the whole time, that there is already a question. The Pri Megadim brings that one down. If according to the Shach, this might be mutar letzli. Since on the one hand you say it's just a little bit, so maybe it's not roteach. Or perhaps we say on this that we're not bekiin. What is considered meliach keroteach or not? In other words, it's just a little bit of salt, yeah, but maybe we're not so bekiin on how much is considered meliach keroteach, that it produces the heat and therefore it causes problems with this meat. So that the Pri Megadim has a suffix legabe. It was the sheer amount of time, but it was just a little bit of salt. But everybody in the third scenario is in agreement that if you have tarti letevusa, two advantages, a little bit of time and a little bit of salt, it's okay. In other words, you can even, I guess you can. Well, that's another machlokes. Can you cook it, or is it just good at tzli? That's, I think, Rabbi Akiva Eiger talks about that the Taz and Shach would have a difference of opinion as to what can you do with it now, especially in the scenario where it was not enough time. It was just 2-3 minutes. Taz says you cannot salt it again and cook it. You can only use tzli, whereas the Shach says since the Ramah allows behefsed meruba bishul kosher can tzli, then in this case too, he would allow, if it was just a little bit of time, right? He would allow to be mevashel it. In other words, to do it over again, right? If you didn't do it with the hadacha, and to cook it, not just for tzli. So this is an important detail, which eventually we'll get to again, is what happens if it just went through the whole process. In other words, you salt completely, 18 minutes or more, then it becomes more complicated. But here, you have a chance. You may be able to redo it if you caught it on time. All right. Now, the Shach does say, Ligabe the Ramah, that when a little bit of hadacha was done, before Melicha, the Ramah says it's mutar b'diavad. This b'diavad means even though it wasn't cooked yet. B'diavad doesn't mean that it's okay, go ahead now and do it again, and do it right, and soak it. No, you don't have, if you did a little bit of hadacha, then it's fine. That mutar b'diavad means that you don't have to do it again, and it's fine. But the evid means it's okay, go ahead and cook it. You don't have to redo it. A lot of times there's no time. There's a lot of guests, it's a hotel. He did it a little bit. Do I have to do it all over again? No, it's fine. All right, but before we go on, I saw Aruch HaShulchan, which I think it makes a very good point here. Regarding this Ramah here. The situation is you salted the meat and you didn't do hadacha. If we paskin like the Ran, that the whole idea of shriya or hadacha, of rinsing it, is to soften in the meat, and therefore in hefsed meruba you can do it all over again in case you never did it, right? Because you hold the whole reason is to soften the meat, and that's why it makes sense that you can do it all over again in case you didn't do it the first time, and there's no concern for any dam being absorbed. Then why are they so concerned if you cut the meat and blood came out? That if you did not rinse it, then it's as though you never rinsed it. Here we said, the hefsed meruba, yesh lehatir, right? To do what? To go ahead and do it all over again. Okay? But wait a minute, over there, if you cut it and you didn't do any hadacha again to the blood that came out, it's a big problem. Here, apparently, the Aruch HaShulchan says it shows that we are leaning or relying on the Ran that says, look, you didn't do it, you can do it all over again.
In other words, you didn't rinse it, but you salted it, but yet.
Right, you didn't cook it.
So then you can rinse it and salt it over again.
Right.
Over there,
and we're not choishes to any dam having been absorbed, right? We're not choishes to the smak.
and if we were choishes, we couldn't rinse it and do it over again.
Right.
So we can rinse it and do it over, and rinse
Right.
and salt it over again.
Right.
Now over there where it was cut, after it was rinsed.
That's correct.
So if it was cut after it was rinsed, we can't rinse it and salt it?
No, you could. We said you
So,
should rinse
so
it.
now it was salted without rinsing over again?
Yeah, but over there,
No, I'm asking-
all it says,
Yeah.
over there, all it says is that in case you didn't do it,
Didn't do it meaning to say you didn't rinse it for salting?
right,
Uh-huh. So you didn't do it as you didn't rinse it before salting.
Right.
So now we have the parallel situation.
we are concerned over there about that dam ba'ain. All of a sudden, we're concerned over there about dam ba'ain, as though you never rinsed it.
So when it wasn't previous, but it was certainly cut, but it wasn't previously rinsed and it was salted without rinsing, we can go back and rinse it and salt it over.
In other words, and therefore we're not concerned with the dam ba'ain.
So that implies that we're not concerned. If we were concerned, we wouldn't make that.
Right.
So it implies that.
It implies that, right?
Over here, where
Right.
it was cut and rinsed and cut over again,
Right.
not rinsed and salted, which seems to be the parallel case, with
Right.
the only difference being that once it was rinsed and then cut again.
Right, right.
This is the only thing where it differs.
Right.
Here, suddenly, we don't permit you to go back and salt it over again because we're concerned about the dam be'ein. Is that what you're saying?
If you didn't, right. In other words,
Well, that's what we're talking about.
right. If you cut it
And you
and you
rinse
didn't
over.
rinse it, it's like you never rinsed it.
Okay, that's fine.
Right, right.
Like it's like you never rinsed it.
Right.
That's fine. But you're
No,
saying
no, no,
then-
no. And there,
And then
you salted it, right?
Then you can't go back and rinse it. And
It doesn't
salt
say
it.
that. Over there, it doesn't say that. So it appears, Aruch HaShulchan says,
Uh-huh.
that over there we're concerned about the dam ba'ain, like the smak, and here we're not. We're relying on the Ran. Because according to the Ran, who only says, I'm mostly concerned about softening the meat, he doesn't care about the dam ba'ain if you cut the piece in two.
How, please,
Yeah.
when you say cut it again, how do we end up with? Because in every situation we're going to say cut it. So at what point do we, when you say
No,
cut
only
it again-
before you salt it. If you ever cut it before you salt it, you have to make sure you rinse it because blood is
If you
coming
cut
out.
it between
question is how
rinsing
big-
and salting.
The question is how big a piece?
Yes.
You
Right.
can't salt the whole rib at one time.
Yeah, okay.
How?
Can, depends. I mean, but if you...
Take a lot of salt.
Yeah, no, you can cut it. You can cut it.
Now the
Yeah.
point is, if you cut it, you have to rinse it before you salt it.
Right.
If you cut it and you don't rinse it and you do go ahead and salt
And
it,
salt it. It's as though you never rinsed it.
that's fine. If
Right.
it's only as though you never rinsed it, that's fine. They can go ahead and rinse it.
Right.
But if you rinsed it and then cut it and then salted it without rinsing it again, that's what the Halacha Shuchan says.
Right.
From the fact that they don't mention they can go ahead and rinse it and salt it,
Right.
it arises that
That's
they
right.
are more concerned in this case.
In this case, with the dam ba'ain, all
The
of a sudden.
dam ba'ain,
So,
uh-huh.
right. That's how he mentions that. If here we're going like the Ran, and we're saying it's okay to go ahead and do it, why would it, does it appear that we're heavily relying or concerned with the Shittas of the Smak much more than here?
And he understands it from the fact that no one mentions that you can go ahead and rinse it over again.
Right. Now, if we hold like the smak, that the dam is nivla ba'in, and therefore that's where you have to rinse it when you cut it, so why would the Ramah here be matri behefse meruba benimlach without adacha to resalt? In other words, if you hold like the Ran, then why is it such a problem over there when you cut it? If you hold like the smak, then why allow it here behefse meruba? In other words, he's trying to figure out. He says, which way do we really hold? It appears like there's one opinion here and a different opinion there. In other words, how could you be matir here behefse meruba if you really hold like the smak? That's the question. And that's why he explains that it must be that the vast majority of poskim hold that even though we are machmir like the smak, we don't really hold like the smak in every respect. We hold like the rosh. What's the difference? The rosh does not consider it a dam ba'in of sorts that will be nivla and not be niflat. He holds it, he considers it a dam pleto. That melicha a second time will help extract. So yes, we are concerned about the dam coming in, being absorbed, but that is not to say that he's stuck with that blood. The second time melicha will bring out that blood too. As we said before, the rush seems to imply here that there's no concern about dam going in and staying there. As long as you have salt on the meat is going to draw it out again. The salt is going to draw out that blood again. It's not a real dam ba'in. It's mishrik shorik, it's boilokach bolto, it flows out. The way it comes in, it comes out. The salt can accomplish that. That's why. So even though, yes, we are concerned about the smak, but not entirely for the reasons he mentions, because we hold more like the rush reasoning, that even though the blood may be absorbed, yes, it will come back out. So that is why behefsed meruba, the Ramah says, you can redo it again. How could I do it again? If it's really like we hold like the smak, yes, we do hold that that's the reason for the hadacha, but we don't hold that the blood will be stuck there. We hold more like the rush, that the same way that the blood goes in with the salt, it can also come out with the salt. That kind of blood does not just, the salt does not just allow the blood to go in and stay there. So long as I'm salting, it will come out too. That's a very important, I thought it was a good explanation, because it helps clarify some of these halachas.
But does that really clarify why in one case we look at it? This is just drawing a conclusion from the fact that we don't.
Right. Understand? I don't know, because he has this difficulty to understand why are we matir here behefsed meruba. If you really hold from there, it implies that you didn't do it. That's it. It's a big problem. It's like it was never done. Never done means you never done, and you salted it, and it went through the whole process. So it says, wait a minute. Is it really like that?
So does anyone actually require meat in such a case?
Yes.
You have to throw it out?
Yeah.
Just because you did rinse it once?
No, remember we have a situation. If you cut it and the blood came out, yeah.
So wait a second.
No, there's a question of whether you can do tzli. That's something else. That's a different question.
But
you should throw away before you say asabah, not bahana.
I think throw away meant akila.
That's what we meant. I'm sorry.
That's an extreme way of putting
it. Yeah. And then we had a question of, can you please do it for tzli? So for tzli, it will depend, on the various shitas too that we said, the shach and the taz. And lemaisa, of course, if you're going to redo it again, you're not going to have that problem. If you're going to rinse it and salt it. But to salt it with the dam ba'in, that would only be a problem according to the smak. Remember, according to the other shitas, it was soaked already. This salt is going to work. And here he says, perhaps it's okay, go ahead and redo it. So that's why the Aruch HaShulchan, I think, explains it I think that's what, it's an important detail. We really hold like the rush, that ultimately, that dam can come out. That's very important. If that dam can come out, that helps a great deal. The only question is, okay, you have a taz and a shach, can I still cook it? Or can I only make tzli? Well, that will depend on the various scenarios. How long was the salt there? How much salt was there? Okay. So then it's a different question. But can I save the meat? Yes, somehow you can save it, either for cooking or for roasting. But you can save it. All right. Before we go into Sif Gimel and Daled, which are pretty much easy, they have to do more with the actual process of how much salt and how many sides. But right before we get into that, the Ramah did say gave us one more scenario. That is the im nimla chaticho below adochom shar chatichos. If let's say you have one piece that was salted that had never had hadocha, together it's being salted on the same platform, same area, with other chatichas that had hadocha. Im nimla chaticho im below adochom shar chatichos mutoros v'hi asura. So the Ramah said that all the other chatichas are mutaras, and it is asur. Well, it is asur, we know why. It has no hadacha. Can I fix it? That was another question. You may be able to still fix it, but the question is now, what about the other ones? What's the problem about the other ones? The problem is that they're getting the blood from the one that's on top that had no hadacha.
What are they getting?
Yeah, well, apparently they may be getting the blood from the one that's on top of them that never had hadacha. Yeah, but the real question is it while they're being salted, can they take care of this other's blood? That's the whole question, the whole machlokes here. While they're being salted properly after hadacha, can they also avoid absorbing the other dam that's coming down on them that never had hadacha, daba'in or whatever?
So we should say while they're receiving blood, they will not absorb.
Exactly. So that we hold that, even though and that's what the Ramah says, but it's not so pashut, that while they are releasing their own blood, they don't absorb any blood.
Neither the other nor their own. Otherwise, it would be a problem all along.
Right. Yeah.
Because they would be reabsorbing their own.
Their own blood, even. Yeah, that's a good point too. They don't absorb their own while they are releasing. Plus, any blood that comes down on them from the other one, which may be a dam ba'in type of dam, is also not going to be absorbed while they are releasing. Why? So they explain. The Taz basically said that this is taken from the Isra Veheter, and over there he explains that basically while they're being salted, we say kebolo kachpolto or dam mishrik shorik. Mishrik shorik means that it just flows off, it slips off. This dam shenimlach is only dam midirabanan, so we're not going to be machmir. The Pri Megadim just adds what I saw. The Pri Megadim's language is as follows: while you're salting, the blood becomes nitlachleach. It becomes softer, it becomes moist, becomes salul, liquidized more, and it's not so much of an issue as it's coming down. But either way, you also have the fact that it's a derabanan. You have the fact of kebola kachpolto, mishrik shorik. It does flow off. You don't have to be concerned with any dam that's coming, even though it's not your own dam. That was the Basar. It's not its own. It's from someone else. As it's drawing out its blood, it will not easily, in other words, absorb something else into it. It will just slip off it.
Does it matter ratio?
No, it doesn't. That's the properties of salt.
Even if there was more not with hadacha?
Right. Yeah. That doesn't appear to make any difference. The main requirement with this salting is that one of the requirements is that it should be in a slant where the blood should be flowing. It should never sit on it. We're going to see it later on when you do salting. You don't want to do it on a flat surface. You don't want to do it in a kli that it doesn't have holes. When people used to put it when you soak it, it's one thing. You soak it in a bucket. But when you're salting it, it has to be on a platform that either is slanted where the blood will flow, or in a kli that has holes where it could drain. That's very, very important that it should not sit in that blood and become kovush. Even for a couple minutes, that could be a problem. It has to be in such a position where it will flow. Okay, so what we've done so far is pretty much talked about the idea of hadocha and what happens if it was not done, how it could be fixed, if it could be fixed. Now we're going to go into the type of salt and the amount of salt. That's what Sif Gimel and Dalad are all about. And this is taken from the Gemara in Chulin and a little bit from the Gemara in Menachos. What does Menachos have to do with it? Well, they used to salt the portions of the imurim, of the korbanos that they used to burn on the mizbeach. Before placing it on the mizbeach, they used to salt it. So that is why that Gemara in Menachos is helpful for us to understand how to do melicha lekdeira. Lekdeira means for a pot, for cooking. We have various sources. But first we turn to the Gemara in Chulin. The Gemara in Chulin talks about what kind of salt. So the Gemara in Chulin there, Kuf Yud Gimel, says as follows. Rav Dimi, when he used to salt his meat or his chicken, Molach le b'milcha galalanita uman pitzle. He used Galilean salt, whatever that means, salt from the north, and after he was done, he would shake it off with the hand or whatever. Okay, what does that tell us? So Rashi in the Rosh learned from that that thin salt, not thick salt, is ideal, is better, is a better choice. Why? Because the thinner the salt is, it will easily dissolve during the melicha, and therefore once you're done with the melicha and you have to remove the salt, you won't have a hard time removing it. You won't have to shake it off because it already has dissolved. So what is Rav Dimi telling us? Rav Dimi is basically telling us you can also use thicker salt. And that is why he was menapetz. When he was done, he had to shake it off. So you see, understand? So one way to learn this Gemara is, you know what? It's better to use a thinner salt. So like this, it dissolves. You don't have a hard time removing it. And why do you have to remove it? Because it has absorbed blood. But if it is already more or less dissolved, like thin, if you put thin salt like we have, it will dissolve. But you've seen the thicker salt. That does not dissolve. That sits there. That you got to remove it, you got to rinse it off, you got to shake it off. So Rav Dimi, by telling us what he did, he's not saying that this is the best salt. For some reason, that's the salt he had. He used to use it, and because it was thick, at the end of salting it, he would shake it off. So Rashi and Rosh says, but the better one is the salt that is easily dissolved. Rambam says just the opposite. If you look at the Rambam, he brings down the halacha that melach gas, a coarse salt, is the preferred choice. Why? He says, on the contrary, the thinner the salt is, it becomes dissolved, and guess what? And because it becomes dissolved, it doesn't do its job. It just melts. And is not able to draw out the blood. I wonder why they didn't do. They should have done tests with it, but it's hard to know. Has all the blood come out or not? But anyway, that's what the Rambam says, that the thin salt does not do a good job. Does it do a partial job? Maybe, but not a good job. So he says you need to use the thick salt. You need to use the coarse salt for this. The Rashba brings down the Raivad, and he holds like the Raivad actually. That says, you know what? All the salts are the same. The melach gas and the melach dak, they actually both do the job. They both are able to draw out the blood. However, since you have to remove it later on, since you have to remove the salt before the adocha rishono, since you have to, in other words, basically remove it before you soak it, you're better off using the thicker salt. Why? Because with the thicker salt, it's very easy to shake off. It comes off very easily. If you've used thinner salt, you're going to have to really, really rub strong to remove all the leftover salt. Because you don't want to have all that salt in the water, because then the water will become like tzir. It will become salty, briny water. You don't want the meat soaking in that water. So you definitely have to remove it. So the Rashba and the Raiva basically say the physics is the same. I mean, they both work. It's an important halacha, an important detail what they're telling us, because if they both work, and all I have, as we're going to see, is my kitchen salt, in other words, not the thicker salt, the table salt, I guess, not kitchen salt, table salt. I'm stuck somewhere, and that's all I have is the regular salt that they sell. I can use it. The Rashba says they both will work. It's just that there's a preference for the thicker salt because that's just easily removable later. The other one might be harder to remove, and you want to remove it, right? So that's what. So these are the various shitas. So the Mechaber says lo yimlach lalocha, lo yimlach b'melach dako kekemach. Lechatchila, don't use a thin salt like flour. V'lo b'melach gasa biyoter shenofelet melabasan. Don't use the very coarse, very thick salt that easily falls off the meat. It doesn't stick. Use something in between. So the salt, I guess, that they use today is more or less in between. That it could stick to the meat and do the job right. But he brings down, of course, that v'im en melach acher, rak melach da kekemach, mutar limloach bo. If that's all you have, is something that is very, very thin like flour, the salt, the thinner salt, it's mutar to salt with it.
If by saying thin one is mutar,
Right.
is he including the very thick one?
No, he's not. He's not excluding it because he's basically saying it
Then why
falls
does he-
off. It falls.
But then why does he say it's mutar regardless of what you use? To the very thin.
He's giving us the preference, more the preference. As we saw with the Rashba, the salt will work. With if you use a very thick one that falls off, you just may have to put a little bit more.
I was just wondering
Because as we will see in the next halacha, you want to make sure that it's very well covered. So he's just being practical. He's telling us, listen, the very thick one just falls off. And if you're not looking and you left this, it just may slip off. So it all depends on how it's placed. It depends if the meat is flat, if it's round, if it's, what are you salting? Chicken, and it's, round, it may fall off. So it all depends. Because, what if it is round? And you do have to put on all the sides. It's going to fall off. And if it turns out that only one side is salted, not the other, it may be an issue. That's the next halacha. So that's why, practically, he's telling us, use a salt that sticks. Not the thinnest one, because according to some, it's also a problem. Very, very thin salt. Thick is also an issue. It can fall off. Something in between. But if that's all you have is the thin one, it's fine. Because the Rashba says it will work. Just make sure after you're done that you rinse it out very, very well. You remove it very, very well. You don't soak it with that. And that's what everybody pretty much uses for Melicha today. It's a special thick salt, coarse salt, that they sell for this kind of process. And that's the halacha. That to use something in between. There is a taz here. It's a small detail. I don't think it's going to happen too often, but it's good to know. Taz brings down here the rashal that when you are going to be salting your meat, you just rinsed it, you soaked it. Be sure that you place it where you ordinarily place meat to be salted, not on a table that may have some salt left over from before. You want to be careful where you put it down, because even if a little bit of salt is there before you begin the process, actually this is even before you rinse, there'll be a problem, right? Then some of the salt may stick to it, to the meat. You don't want some salt to begin to stick to the meat before it's properly rinsed, before you actually start the melicha. So you're bringing the meat from the butcher, you're placing it down on your kitchen table, which you may have had salt there sitting there. It could be a problem. So it's something to think about, something to consider. Don't just put it anywhere, because if you haven't yet rinsed it or soaked it and you're going to have some salt stick to it, it could be an issue. But the Eved, we're not machmir. A little bit of salt is not going to make it or break it. But you want to be careful. All right. The next seif Dalet. How much salt? Now here in Seif Dalet, we're going into a very interesting area because of the Ramot and the Mechaber. The Mechaber tells us just how to go about it, how to do it. The Ramot goes into a whole different concept of the concept. I call it the concept of Yud-based shows of 12 hours. We'll see if we have time to get into it briefly. Mechaber says, as far as how much salt, יפזר עליו מלח שלא יישאר בו מקום מבלי מלח. Okay, in order to understand this, so let's turn to the Gemara real quickly. The Gemara says, listen, אין הבשר יוצא מדמו אלא אם כן מולכו יפה יפה. The meat will not release all its blood unless you salted it yafe yafe. You salt it very, very well. Okay, so we turn to the Gemara Menachos that I told you, Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph. That over there, but the imurim, the pieces of meat that were brought on the mizbeach, it says over there, how did you do it? You salted it from the front, from the back, from all the sides, and then you put it on the mizbeach. So it says that. That's how you did it. On the imurim, on those pieces of the Gemaras that went to be burnt on the mizbeach. So Abaye on that Gemara says, Hu hadin lekdera. In the same way that is done for korbanos, that is also the way to do it for kedera. Kedera means a pot for cooking. All right. What does that mean? That you salt it basically from all sides. And Tosfos and Rashi both say that that's what it means. That in order to salt it for cooking purposes, you do it exactly the way it was done in Korbanos. However, there's another Tosfos there where Rabbeinu Tam says that it's more mashma from the Gemara that the main requirement for Kedera is that it should be salty enough she'eno nechal machmas molchoi, that it's so salty that it cannot be consumed because of the saltiness. There's not so much the importance of covering every square inch, but much more that this should be salty enough, with enough salt, that it's totally not edible because of the amount of salt. Eino nechal machmas molchoi. Now we know about this concept of Eino nechal machmas molchoi from Taaruvot, from elsewhere. It's very salty. But that this should apply here is interesting. But that's what Rabbeinu Tam says, that really it's not necessary that you have to cover every square inch. The main thing is that there's enough salt on this meat somehow, where the whole meat, even though not all of it is covered, is so salty that it's Eino nechal machmas molchoi. Okay. So now what? So the Rishonim have a whole machlekes here. So based on what we've seen in the Gemara, Rashi and Tosfos, what are the requirements of, at least lechatchila, in salting a piece of meat? Remember, you sometimes have very big pieces of meat, sometimes you have smaller pieces of meat. Perhaps, if the meat is not thick, can I get away with just salting one side? Do I really have to salt the whole thing? Both sides? All around? Every square inch? So the Rashba says, the mitzvah min hamufchar, the right way to do it, the correct way, the ideal way, is to salt a piece of meat, every piece of meat, from all the sides. But b'di'evid, he says, if you only salted it very well, thoroughly, from one side, to the point where it's not edible, it's enough. The Rosh, if you look at the Rosh, it says you gotta salt it all over until there's not one spot without any salt. So if you look at what's funny about this is that if you look at the various poskim, they say, if you read the Rosh, you actually have the impression that he says if you didn't do it like that, it's no good, because he says you have to cover every spot. Now, let me ask you something. I mean, if you see that, what does that tell you? You have to salt it. Does that mean that in case you didn't do it, it's going to be a problem? Perhaps all he's saying is, that's the way you should do it. But what if you left 1 inch here, 1 inch there, that you didn't do? Didn't cover every inch. Is that going to mess it up? He doesn't say. But that's how the Beis Yosef explains it on the tour. The tour bringing down this halacha. The Beis Yosef says, it doesn't mean that the Rosh argues on the Rashba, that you need every square inch, otherwise it's no good. He's just saying this is how you do melicha. You cover it well all over, with salt, every spot. What happens if you didn't? If you left a few spots without any salt, it's still okay, as long as it was well thoroughly salted, that it's not nechal machmas molchoi. So that's what the Beis Yosef explains, that in reality there's no machlokes Rosh. Sometimes people like to make a machlokes. Oh, we have two shitas here. Maybe the two shitas are the same. I've seen the Aruch HaShulchan basically do the opposite. He tries to make shalom. He tries to say, no, they're really, all these shitas are really more or less are saying the same thing. They're just saying it differently, like by Hadacha. He says, they may mean more or less the same thing, but they're saying it slightly different, or for additional reasons they're saying what they're saying. Sometimes there's no machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Perhaps they just look at it a little bit from a different angle. So that's what the Beis Yosef does here. He says there's no machlokes. He says lechatchila, go ahead and salt it everywhere. But that's not le'ikuva. It does not mean that there's an ikuva, meaning it was that if you didn't do it, it's going to be an issue. But if you look at the Isur V'Heter, which is very interesting here, the Isur V'Heter brings down B'Shem Chachmei Ashkenaz, in the name of the many Chachamim of Germany. He says that they were very, very strict about this. If it was not covered completely, it would be a problem. That it would be an ikuva. Alright, le halacha. let's see what the halacha is. Siv Daled. Yifazer alav melach, go ahead and cover it with salt. Shelo yishaer bo makom bli melach. Like we said, like the rush. Don't leave a spot without salt. And how much? Yimlach kedei shelo yirau le'echol im oto melach. Put enough of it also that it should not be edible with it. But you know what? Eino tzarich le'arbot alav melach yoter mize. You don't have to really stuff it. Pile it up. Cover it all the sides. Put enough that it's already not edible to eat it this way. It's so salty. That's it. Umolcho mishnei tzdadim. Of course, and salt it from the two sides. What if it's very, very thick meat?
Two sides.
Well, if you have a slab of meat, you basically have two. You have two sides basically. It depends how thick the meat is. Right, but you're right. If it's a very thick, yeah. And even though it's thick, it will go through. It will extract the blood very well, no matter how thick it is. It doesn't say anywhere that if it's a thick meat, you gotta cut it in half. The poise can point this out over here that you don't see anywhere here that we need to be concerned that with the thick meat you cut it in slices. No, as long as you cover it with salt from all corners, you're safe. Molcho mishnei tzdadim from the two sides. What about chickens? And the same applies, of course, to kachke. How do you say that? To ducks and goose or geese. V'ofot tzarich lemolcham gam mibifnim. You also need to salt it also from the inside. There's a cavity. Even though I think I remember seeing a Pri Megadim that he recommends that with chicken you go ahead and use an axe or whatever knife to axe it in the middle, split it, so you shouldn't have a cavity. But I don't think I've seen too many people do that, because sometimes you want to have stuffed chicken. Right? I don't know. I don't think they do that. But lechatchila, they definitely put salt inside. What happens if you didn't? If you did not salt it only from the inside, or only from the outside, v'chein chaticha, a piece, from one side instead of the two, b'diavad, mutar. So chicken that was only salted from the outside, or from the inside, or a piece of meat, not a chicken, that was only salted on one side, b'diavad, it's mutar. The Ramah, yesh oishim afilu b'diavad. You want to make sure that there's no part of the piece of meat left without salt. And he writes that that's the minhag. V'hochinog im lo letzorech. And dafka im kvar nisbashel kach. And that this last portion of the Ramah, we may need to discuss it next week, because here he gets into this concept of Yud Beis Shosh. He says, when I say b'diavad, it's okay in a real situation where there's no other choice, and there's a lot of people that need to be fed or whatever, that's only in kvar nisbashel. If it's been cooked and it was salted partially, okay. Aval im lo nisbashel adayin lo yivashen okach. If you did not cook it yet, don't cook it this way. Ela. Even we talk Yud Beis Shosh, if it's within 12 hours, shenimlach, that it was salted, yachzor ve'yimlach tzad hasheni, go ahead within the 12 hours and salt it on the second side. Then cook it. V'yivashenu achar kach. V'im hu acha Yud Beis Shosh, if it's after 12 hours, azay yetzilenu, then go ahead and put it barbecue. The nura mishav shoiv, because the fire will draw out the blood that's still in there. Ve'ena tzad shenimlach kvar bolea mitzad shelo nimlach, and the side that was salted will not absorb from the side that was not salted. Okay, so he makes a distinction between 12 hours versus after 12 hours, but his main heter here of b'di'evet is before being cooked. In other words, the main b'di'evet was if it's already cooked, then you have no choice. You can rely on the opinions who hold, fine. If it was partially salted, okay. But if it was not cooked yet, there's still work to be done here to repair the situation. Go ahead and salt the other side. Now what's interesting is that he holds that it's only sufficient to salt the side that was not done. We'll see, I think Rabbi Akiva Eiger holds, no, go ahead and do the whole thing together. There's a question whether you have to do the whole thing together, and it all depends if the salt was already rinsed. There are opinions that hold very interestingly, that once you rinse the salt off the meat, you know what that water does to the meat? It seals off the pores. And once the pores are sealed, you cannot easily do melicha again. Not everybody holds like that. So this is another idea that we will talk about another time, is what happens if you remove the salt, if you rinsed it already, does the halacha change? And according to some, it does change. Or at least it requires you to salt both sides, even though you already did one side, versus just the one side you didn't. So that would make the difference. The water, rinsing it could be a problem, but we hold that you can at least salt the whole thing again. So what did we see here so far? That the Ramah doesn't like this idea of not salting it completely. He's machmir, and it only mamish, but the eved, it's already cooked, then you could rely on the other opinions. The Taz explains that this b'di'evet is in a hefsed meruba situation. And it would also apply, by the way, to chicken. The Mechaber says chicken on one side or inside is fine. The Ramah would require inside too. The Shach and Taz, however, are both in agreement that if you really did it on both sides, you just didn't cover every square inch, it's okay. Even without hefsed meruba. That the hefsed meruba is only in a situation where you did one side and not the other. I saw an interesting Pri Chodosh, and I remember this when we were learning Hilchos Melicha years ago, that he may not be the only one that brings it down, but I think he at least is one of the ones that brings down the following scenario, that if you went ahead and salted a chicken from one side, everybody would agree that it's no good. Why? Because the chicken has a cavity in between the two sides. When do we say that a chicken that was done on one side is good enough? When one entire side was done and not the inside, or the inside and not the outside. But if you only did one side of the chicken, one side of it, of the outside, then that one side of the outside cannot get to the other side because there's a cavity in between. You follow me? You understand what I mean? There's a cavity. When there's no cavity, doing one side perhaps can get to the other side, the Pri Chodosh says. But on a chicken, if you did just one side of the outside, you didn't go through the whole thing. No good. You have to fix it. Pri Megadim does also bring down a very important halacha, and we may eventually talk about it more in depth. People have to be careful when they buy chickens before they cook it, even if it's salted, that they remove sometimes the intestine, the liver is inside in the bag, and the liver was not koshered yet. It's going to be a big problem, and we're going to learn it. What happens if you went ahead and cooked the chicken that was salted with the liver that was not koshered yet inside of it, still there? And sometimes, it's not just sitting there, it's sitting in a bag, which makes, in some ways, it can make things worse or better, whatever. It may be a little bit of it may make a little bit of a difference, but it could be an issue. What else could be there besides the liver? The heart. And the heart and liver have different ways of kosher, of being made kosher, if you really want to have them. I don't think the heart is such a great idea to have, but the liver is definitely good. It's healthy, especially if you're anemic and you need some more iron. Beef liver, chicken liver, with onions. Fry them, enjoy them. But the Pri Megadim brings down that a chicken that was salted before they took out the internal organs, he says that the salt did what it achieved, what it was supposed to achieve on the chicken, but not on the internal organs. Obviously, you need to take out the internal organs and do to them whatever you need to do to them. Well, that's good to know that he says that, because according to others, you just ruined it if you did it that way, because of the blood in the liver and the heart. But he at least says that you didn't ruin it. In other words, it worked on the chicken. It just didn't work on the organs, and go ahead and take care of those organs the way you always do. So, which is an important idea. I mean, you would think that it would be like you cooked them together, which would be a problem. And Pri Megadim says no. Just go ahead and remove the heart and the liver and prepare them as they are prepared. The heart actually has to be sliced very, very well and remove all the blood from it. Like we learned by kachal, the way the milk is removed. So the heart has a special way of removing the blood from it. Some, however, say that once you did it this way, if you by mistake salted the chicken with the internal organs, the only cure to this would be tzli. You would have to roast it. Only tzli would now take out any blood that may still be in there because of the internal organs. So that's something that can come up, that's something that can happen that you have to be careful with. Occasionally, especially when you buy a whole chicken. You want to make sure there's no internal organs. Even though the chicken was already kashered, which, by the way, would also be a problem if it was already kosher with the internal organs being there. But at least for the cooking, you can't cook them together if the internal organs haven't been kashered. And sometimes they just leave them in there, assuming that the balabasta knows what to do. They don't. I've heard of cases of people buying fresh liver that was never kosher and just going ahead and cooking it. The liver that was not kashered, you cannot cook. You can roast. You can do tzli. They put in big letters, not kosher, but do people know what that means? What does that mean, not kosher? It's not kosher? No, it is kosher, but it's not kosher. In other words, don't sell it. I don't believe in selling something like that. It's a michshol. Before people a lot of people don't know how to prepare liver. You can't. Once, you've roasted it, you can then cook it. Liver, you can't just cook. Neither can you do that with the heart. So leaving internal organs in the chicken, if you buy it and you see that, it's a question. Unless you see it in bags, that they just put it back for you, that means it wasn't salted with them, that means that you should take care of it yourself, but the chicken is okay. At least I know the chicken is okay. Chicken was salted properly. Probably the organs were not in there while it was being salted, because you find it in the bag. The bag, I guess, tells you that it most likely, hopefully, was not salted that way. And even if it was, what we do know from the Pri Megadim, that having found the internal organs, at least the Melicha did help you with the chicken. Whereas others would hold you, the only thing you can do right now is do tzli. So it's something to watch out for. I don't think it's a good idea to put it back inside the chicken, unless somehow it's clear, somehow that it was definitely not in there at the time of Melicha, But it could be confusing, it could be misleading. You have to watch out. A lot of people don't know the halachas, and you have to be careful with these things. Anyway, lechatchila, it's important to salt as much as possible over the entire piece of meat and chicken, inside and out. But if a few spots are left there, most of the chicken is not edible, it's so salty, it's good enough and it's fine. The diet, of course. Okay, we'll stop here.